All right, we are live. Bill Davis, welcome back to the Future of Fitness.
Great to be with you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for doing this. Every time I've interviewed you, I've learned a lot. I know the industry and the listenership is very well received, so people get a lot of value out of these and your insights. And I'm just going to dive right into it. So, you're the CEO of ABC Fitness. You guys have a lot going on. We're going to talk quite extensively about artificial intelligence. To no one's surprise, listen to this podcast or is generally walking around alive and aware. But let's start with this before we get into that stuff, because I want to set the table about AI's role in fitness, especially how maybe you guys are applying it internally, externally. The thought process, I think critical thinking right now is more important than ever with a tool like this. So I want to dig into your head a little bit, but maybe give us some updates. It's been about a year and a half, I think, since I've had you, Bill. What's new at ABC?
Wow, it's been quite a year, not just for ABC, but the industry as a whole. We continue to make sizable progress on our integrated product strategy. And in fact, we brought to market now better part of 2 years ago, ABC Ignite, which is really our flagship product that is oriented towards big box gyms. And we have seen phenomenal adoption of that, and our largest customers upgrade to that capability. And we're really excited by that kind of progress. We've also made a concerted effort to capitalize on what we see as being a phenomenal international growth opportunity. So we have onboarded new leadership. Our dear friend Emmett Williams joined us
That's right.
as our APAC leader just a few short months ago, and we've got some exciting things that we're exploring and aggressively pursuing in terms of growth opportunities in that region of the world. We recently announced a new leader in the UK. And so EMEA, Western part of Europe, UK, Ireland in particular, are key areas of focus for us. We also have stood up a new center of excellence in Hyderabad, India. And we literally launched that in January, and have literally in 8 months' time taken that from zero to now about 160 employees that are there. And that's all about, and it's germane to the AI discussion. How do we build centers of excellence that we can build at scale in an efficient, effective manner? And I've had the pleasure of standing up now over the course of my career 3 operations in India, and I just marvel at the pace of advancement in that region of the world. In Hyderabad specifically, when I was over there, a few short months ago, you felt like you were in virtually any other modernized, city, a developed city, and the talent is just unbelievable. So we're very excited about that. And then innovation is the final point. And so we have launched some new capabilities in and around our core competency of commerce, in particular, an offering we're referring to as intelligent billing. We have absolutely capitalized on AI offering in the areas of member retention, but also in the personal training realm. How do we make those business operations more efficient, more effective, and a lot more to come on that front. But a lot of exciting developments, and I really appreciate you asking. But I often tell the team, I feel like we're just getting started, because I will tell you, Eric, I'm as bullish as I've ever been about what lies ahead over the next 4 to 5 years as I have been about what's transpired over the past several years since joining ABC.
That's awesome, man. And excuse my naivety here, but what is a center of excellence exactly?
Yeah, so it's not a separate, office or group of resources that are kind of off on an island doing their own thing. We are very intentionally, the large percentage of that team for us is in the product management, product development realm, although it's augmented by some back office capabilities there. But we are literally building extension of teams that are oriented towards specific expertise. And in our instance, again, we found it as an opportunity where we could build at scale fairly rapidly, AI capability. So that's one tangible attribute. We are also enhancing our capabilities there extensively. And so just think about it as being, we are very intentional of, okay, we need to build this capability Where should we do it? Do we get the power of it being integrated in a singular location? We're doing that at scale, in a very attractive market, and that being hydrogen.
Well, let's get to the big topics here. So there's not an interview that goes by that I do, or most conversations, either professionally or like at dinner parties, as I like to say, when my wife gently kicks me in the shin when I start bringing up AI, right? But there's so many different applications of it, and I feel like we're just starting to feel the mass ramifications of what artificial intelligence is. Like you and I were just kind of joking, but not joking about like, have you noticed that your internet's lagging the last 2 to 3 months? And I feel like the water is just starting to heat up on the frog, right?
Absolutely.
As that analogy goes. So, as we try to adapt, it's really hard with the speed that it's advancing. And I personally think that when you look at AI's role in our industry or any industry abroad, is that the critical thinking of the human and how to apply and how to prioritize the AI applications is really the most key thing we can do as leadership within this industry. And for people who didn't listen to it, we had a great podcast about a year and a half ago on build, buy, or partner, right? So you kind of applied your thought pattern to how do you make decisions like that as leadership? And I think that's probably the biggest thing is like as a leader of a company, one of the bigger ones in our industry, how are you approaching the application of AI? How are you making decisions around it? How are you prioritizing?
Yeah. So if you'll indulge me, I want to
Please.
digress. I want to digress just a little bit and confess that coming into this year, I certainly had an eye towards, the importance of AI, not a lot of clarity of thought, honestly, especially in the January, February timeframe of explicitly to your very point, how was ABC Fitness going to go about capitalizing on this exciting opportunity? And I was invited to our private equity owners. They brought senior executives from their portfolio companies together and sharing a perspective on who were really on the front, on the leading edge, and who were in essence lagging. And they didn't call anybody out, but as I was observing, it was very obvious to me that ABC was not where it needed to be. And we needed to get religion, and we needed to get religion quickly. And what I took away from that conversation and we started to enact immediately is what I affectionately refer to as a top down and a bottom up approach. And it all is geared towards embracing that this is not a project for an organization like ABC. It is a full out organization transformation. And because you need, in our instance, the 2,000 employees that make up ABC, I need every one of us thinking on a daily, hourly basis, how am I leveraging and capitalizing on this new enhanced capabilities to make what I'm doing more efficient, more effective, and ultimately deliver more value to the marketplace. So for us, it really started with, are we establishing from a top down perspective the right governance, the right leadership, the right expectations? Are we equipping the organization the right way in terms of the tools that we're deploying and investing in? And ultimately, how are we developing what we refer to as AI champions in the organization? And how are we promoting their successes and using that as a little bit of a momentum builder in this overall organization transformation that I described? And it has been really impressive the pace at which we've been able to do that. So we now have dedicated AI leadership that sits on my executive council because of its importance. We've established an AI cross-functional AI council where they're entrusted in aiding and setting that strategic direction for our business. We are selecting common tools that we're using. And in our instance, especially given that we operate in over 100 countries now, governance is a big deal. Data privacy and how you're able to access the data and the like is very, very important. And I dare say the rules are very, very different depending on which region of the world you're in. And we have to be attentive. We have to be attentive to all that. All the while, from a bottoms up perspective, we have been encouraging and promoting the development of proof of concepts. And that's what we refer them to. And they are originating from our support organization to our customer success organization to our development organization to our finance organization. They're coming from everywhere. And as I said before we started recording, our chief challenge is not, is there enough opportunity to drive real value leveraging AI? Our challenge is how disciplined you need to be in choosing from what is just an endless number of opportunities to yield the biggest bang for your buck. In our instance, the final point I would make for you to think about is most businesses have a responsibility to, I think, first and foremost, think about how this is going to be leveraged to deliver better outcomes, better product, better capabilities to their customer base. But you also have to be very intentional balancing that with how you leverage it to drive operational efficiency in your own business as well. And how do you find that right balance between those two? And I wouldn't say we've got that exactly right, but we're very attentive to it and we're allocating resources all with an aim to try to strike a balance in that regard.
Well, I think the good news for everybody listening is like I don't think anybody's struck that balance right. It's nearly impossible. It's happening so fast. Bill, in your lifetime or even just historically, have you ever seen a technology that's more transformative than what we're seeing right now?
I mean, there's a couple, and everybody uses the same example. So
Sure.
I'm not that creative. You think about the iPhone, when smartphones, came to market, the intuitiveness of that application and how it proliferated, society and just quite frankly, fundamentally changed basic activities like how we take photos and how we send messages and how we communicate and the like. I think there are parallels. The difference is the pace and rate of innovation and the cycle time compression that this is creating for us. Taking it away from fitness, but still germane. I had the pleasure. I was in New York about a couple of months ago and listening to one of the cybersecurity, the CEO of one of the larger cybersecurity firms, and they were talking about, I'll give you two dimensions. By virtue of the technology's advancements, much of which fueled by AI, the rate and pace of cyber attacks is compounding at a frightening rate. And because their ability, these individuals that are executing, these attacks, their ability to leverage this technology and its relative sophistication is significant. But the opposite is also true. The tools that are being developed in the identification of these attacks and the mitigation steps associated with it, they would say literally, just a year ago, were denominated in days. And now it's increasingly being denominated in hours, if not minutes. And so the pace and rate of this computing power and the knowledge synthesis, if you will, is what is just to me, most exciting. And that's why suggesting that this is in any way a fad or you don't need to be thinking about it. I think you're absolutely right spending all the time that you are, Eric, talking about it because it's going to fundamentally change our way of being and in the way we interact and how we ultimately in the fitness industry, how ultimately fitness and consumers think about their fitness journeys.
Yeah, just like a small example this week because I'm dealing with a lot of going back and forth on contracts. It's just that time of year for me, and I used to pay an attorney $300 an hour to
Yeah.
review my contracts. Pay ChatGPT $30 a month. And you know what? It does a really good job. And it nailed some things in a contract I don't even think my attorney would have found. And, we still remote. But, it's just like those little things. I'm like, when I was joking with the person, I'm like, well, why don't you send me the contract? My GPT will review it and then send it back and your GPT will review it. And then we'll just go from there. Right. Like, let's just cut through it. So it's like these little things that 2 years ago, I never would have imagined I was doing. but it's happening in almost, it's almost feels normal now. So I digress. Let's get back into the bigger things. So
I will share just to that
please.
point though, because it's
Yeah.
a phenomenal example, and we could probably rattle off dozens of similar applications. But I will make a bold prediction that in our lifetimes, because we were talking about our respective ages a little bit before we started recording, in our lifetimes, we will have. I firmly believe that we will each have individual personal assistants that are all AI generated, and all of our underlying activities and kind of related responsibilities. It just, you can see it as clear as day, and at least in my mind's eye, in terms of that capability. And it really just speaks to the rate of innovation and how rapidly this is evolving. Well, I think we will all have the benefit of enjoying that in our lifetime, as I suggested.
Well, I'm going to double down on that. I'm going to say it's going to be done by 2030. I mean,
Yeah.
someone like just even I have my own, I've trained a couple different ones, but like one for just for my health, right? It's fed it all of my health information from blood work to genomics to, history, like a lot, my wearable data history, all this stuff. And it gives me really good suggestions for any kind of biohacking that I like to do because I'm a bit of a hacker in that way. And it's been really great. Do I trust it implicitly? Like, no, of course you can't. Not yet, but fairly soon, it's almost just as good as a human. So
You raise a good point, though, and I almost said this in your contract review, scenario. It is incumbent on us to recognize it is not perfect,
no.
and so you absolutely still have a responsibility to inspect and ultimately, ensure that you're not relying on something falsely. Because I agree with you in terms of its rapid advancement, but where we sit today, there is, we have to be realistic about propensity for error and the like. It's real.
Well, maybe as we're thinking, I'm going to break this down into three categories for the time I have with you. Like, number one, like, what are some of the major features of AI that you guys are deploying for operators? Number
Yeah,
two, one is the major use cases that you're using internally as a company, and then number three, Bill personally, like
yeah,
how are you using it? So let's start with like for the operators. What are you guys
yeah.
looking at?
Yeah, so we've got several areas of focus, and increasingly, and I should have said this in terms of update, for ABC, given our unabiding commitment to integrated capabilities. At the beginning of this year, we pivoted from what was historically a four platform organization structure of Ignite, GlowFox, Trainerize, Evo, to where we turned the business on its side and became fully functional. Its relevance is, we're increasingly talking about the marketplace around the segments that we serve. So if I refer to big box, studio, boutique, coach, personal trainer, you're like, what does that mean in terms of offering? I wanted to kind of make that connection for you. But in the context of what we're doing, I'll go with the coach, personal trainer. AI is fundamentally changing some of the most basic tasks. And we have offered to the marketplace just literally personal training programs and the ability for trainers to leverage that, quite frankly, expand their capacity to take on more. You talked about you're on the medical side. We're seeing similar application in terms of really exciting advancement on nutrition tracking and on habit tracking. And we're building those capabilities in as well. And then the third, and you talked about the build by partner, we're looking at partnership and M&A in terms of even more advanced capabilities that will aid in kind of that coach experience, all with the aim of improving their capacity to really focus on the personalization of that customer or client experience. On the big box studio boutique, the focus to date has really been around applications that support improving your target for new member acquisition and driving your customer acquisition cost down, because you're leveraging the technology to really drive more precision in where your marketing messaging and what type of messaging should be effectively utilized. Similarly, on the retention side of the house. And then third is through the data or business insights for the club operators. How are you leveraging the information of like how your club is being utilized to actually improve efficiency or effectiveness? That centers around things like equipment maintenance, programming, hours of operations, staffing levels that are necessary in terms of aligning with a peak performance and when you can, in essence, optimize in different ways. And then the final point is, and I would say this is more as we think about 26, 27, taking some of the most basic responsibilities of what I often refer to as that front staff daily engagement, and how much of that can you take off their plate through automation. And that could be updating member information and the like. A lot of that is ripe for automation and how we're thinking about it in terms of embedded capabilities.
Amazing. And, when you're looking at, I think this is really critical for operators because I don't, operators still need to operate their gym, right? They need to
Yeah.
focus on the basics and the fundamentals. And if you start worrying too much about what AI is doing, how do I play AI? I think that's where companies like yours in ABC are really critical during this time, because I would say kind of offshore that to ABC Fitness, because that's their job. That's your job, right? Is to figure out this whole AI thing. You guys are a software company or a technology company. When you're looking, and this is just kind of a side note, but have you seen any creative applications by operators on their own of putting AI into their systems and their operations?
Yeah, I touched on a few of them, but just what has struck me as just really encouraging, and it's really motivating a different dialogue between us and our customers, and that is we want the data, and we want the data in unstructured way, in a way that will afford us to develop our own agents and kind of analyze this in a way that we want to. And so data as a service is increasingly becoming more and more of a common experience. The other thing that I'm fascinated by, even just a year ago, I would tell you, Eric, that it was really only the larger brands that were thinking and had the wherewithal, our ability to really own exclusively that member experience. Well, again, through technology, now that is being completely democratized, and even the smaller operators have an opportunity to take greater ownership of that personalized or differentiated experience. Now, much of that is running through the mobile solution, but there is just phenomenal advancement occurring just in terms of that engagement. And in fact, a key offering that I didn't make mention of, it was embedded in some of the applications that I talked about, but the conversations that we're having around CRM specifically, and how AI is being leveraged extensively to give operators that flexibility to curate that personalized experience and that member engagement, is a thing that I'm really most intrigued by and most excited by. I also have witnessed some operators that I'd say are a bit more advanced in their thinking, as I intimated, taking some of the basic tasks that historically they relied on hourly resources to do, leveraging AI to displace kind of some of that burden and allowing those resources to be more oriented towards improved member experience. So that I've found intriguing. But it's really this engagement with member and how they're taking greater ownership of that through leveraging this technology that I'm most intrigued by. I just want to underscore your point. What I've also observed, just not so much the last 6 months, but I'd say over the last 3 years, is I think people are increasingly asking themselves the right question, and that is, what is my core competency? Where do I want to really place my energy and focus? And where do I need trusted partners to aid in what is not a core competency of mine? And I would say, especially when you think about things like data security, privacy, that again are going to be intensified through leveraging AI I think that's where players like ABC ultimately can play a more positive, impactful role for you and your.
Excellent point. So, we talked about this before recording as well, but what about internally? Like, what are some of
Yeah.
the ways that you guys are leveraging?
Yeah, let me give you three really exciting, tangible examples.
Great.
First adoption was in our client success organization. We have customer engagement in all different forms, whether it's through telephone, email, through our ticketing systems, and the like. One's ability to synthesize that in a way that not only you really have a central repository of what's going on at a individual customer level, but actually be able to measure it in terms of customer sentiment. We have been able to literally in the last several months create very effective customer health scores based on literally 6 to 8 disparate data sources that are all being synthesized to give us that holistic view. And again, you couldn't do that. I couldn't do that a year ago. So it has been game changing because we're able to get ahead of issues, for the benefit of the customer, very, very quickly compared to the past. The second application is in our development organization. So it is absolutely being leveraged in terms of how we are developing code. And I shared with you the example. Yes, I admit we don't develop 100% accurate code at all times. And so bugs happen from time to time. And historically, when a bug arose, it would take our development organization some time to identify the bug, develop a remediation, and get that remediation into production. And I would say cycle time of that bug historically would have been a week to 2 weeks. Now, with AI agents, in essence, aiding in that quality review and bug identification process, we've taken those cycle times from weeks down to literally hours. And
Wow.
so our improvement in terms of quality product coming to market is very, very exciting. The third is it's actually quasi internal operations, but it has very much customer facing impact. Big part of what we do is the billing and collection for our customer base. So leveraging AI in terms of optimization of billing cycles. So when is, the right time to bill? We're using that technology more and more for that. But then analyzing when we are seeing discrepancy, return for collections have ticked up a little bit this past year across the portfolio. Why is that? And really analyzing and giving unique insight back to our customers is yet another application that we've deployed very recently. I could go on and on because we have
Oh,
them
I'm
in
sure.
every area of the business.
I'm
But those are
sure. Yeah. Well, how about you personally, Bill, as a busy CEO? Like, what
yeah.
what, what is a day to day or week to week use that you have?
So I like to think a fairly decent fitness enthusiast. And so leverage it extensively personally for, the balance and impact of my cardio, strength training regimens aligned with my habits, nutrition, sleeping, and other activities to give me, and you were talking about, giving me that influence of, am I kind of finding that right balance? And I'm obviously leveraging wearables and biometric kind of insights to aid in that. So that's, I'd say, how I feel like I interacted the most at a very personal level. In terms of the work that I do, I am in Chat GPT probably 30 times a day. And to my point of accuracy, I have chosen to embrace it as a thought initiator. So I will find myself just curious or thinking about, and I'll ask range of questions to really get that thought process and dialogue started. I'm not personally candidly loading a bunch in and doing, as you were talking about, contract review. It's really clever, but I'm increasingly, leveraging it, for more and more of just aiding in my thought process and equipping myself more and more with insights that kind of advance my thinking. Case in point, I did a recent trip. I did a recent trip over to Australia, and really was, in terms of who I was meeting with, wanting to educate myself on, because it's an adjacent market to where we operate day in and day out, and what I was able to do, on my flight over, in educating myself, in that particular area, I was blown away, and
It's crazy.
it is really,
Yeah.
really powerful.
To the point about travel too, you and I were talking about my upcoming trip to Japan, and I've had to build out our entire itinerary. I gave it like everything from the details of what train to take at what time, when exactly we'll arrive, like estimated thing, like the whole thing is so detailed. And of course, I showed it to my wife. I'm like, look what I did all by
Yeah.
myself. Right. But, it's quite, and once you start using it, and I think that's the biggest thing is people who are not using it on a day-to-day basis, just start using it. Pose it a question, right? Something you normally search for Google, put it into ChatGPT instead, or whatever, Claude, or whatever it is that you use. I mean, it's not that hard to get started. And I oftentimes equate it to like when wearable technology started coming into the scene for gym owners and coaches back in, like, I don't know, 2010, right? I always encourage people, like, well, just get one. If you're a coach or a trainer or a gym owner, get a wearable. And because you're going to start getting these questions more and more and more. And the more familiar you are, then the more you can use it. Maybe you'll just come up with a creative self application for it as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. One of the last questions I want to ask you, Bill, is, as an industry, maybe this isn't as positive, but maybe it's still very useful for people. Is there any roles within the industry that you think, if someone you knew and loved was in that role, you're like, hey, you may want to start looking for something different because this may not be around very long?
Yeah. Well, we have this debate extensively in ABC. I think, generally speaking, most entry level most entry level functions will, for all intents and purposes, be able to be automated. And again, I think about things like AP clerks, or even payroll analyst, or baseline developer capabilities. I think all of those are vulnerable in terms of technology being able to do much of that quicker, more accurately, more effectively. So the philosophical conversation that we have is, how are people going to be trained for what becomes the new
Yes.
elevated entry level,
Yeah. If there is no entry level, how do you get to the next level
without having what is
without that
historically.
experience? Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually, I'm very passionate about education, and I believe that society will correct itself or respond to that in a way where that will naturally happen. Because what you and I are capable of doing, I always think about it in terms of what you and I are capable of doing. We were talking also before we started film about our parents and what we are exposed to. Well, then you then translate that to our kids and what our kids have had exposure to and how they have information. They are just naturally more advanced and more capable of disseminating information, or receiving and disseminating information, than I certainly was when I was their age. And so I think through effective utilization of experiential learning, I think it will rectify itself. But I think if you're of the view that I'm satisfied with what is today defined as truly entry level, I think there are unique vulnerabilities. I think in the world we live in, I think the role of software engineers in its purest sense, I think increasingly, if you are proficient, and I dare say an expert at agent writing, creating or creation, I think you are going to differentiate yourself in a market that needs that capability. In a similar way, it all is fueled by data. And so how data is managed, thought about, organized, secured, and the like, I think represents a tremendous opportunity. And so I think that's what I would say is I don't want to use the word remedial, but those basic tasks are where I think there's a likely vulnerability over time.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I know you're a busy man, Bill, so I want to respect your time and get to the last question, which is, what do you need help with right now as the industry listens? Is there specific roles you're looking to fill? Is there any partnerships you're looking for? Like, what can we help you with?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I don't, there's no specific need that I have. I would just simply say, as I said earlier, my optimism about this industry and about what it can become, I just have never been more bullish. But I also believe that it will evolve. And I'll offer a couple perspectives, a lot of discussion around convergence of fitness to wellness to health. What we're seeing again is a divergence of who's paying for fitness and who's consuming fitness. And that is motivating different expectations from the payer community to that of the consumer community, no different than healthcare has been. And so we are actively and critically evaluating, how do we seize that consolidation or movement, towards, or the convergence of fitness to health ultimately. Another exciting hire that we undertook earlier this year was we brought Mo Iqbal on as our chief strategy officer. And Mo and I were having a conversation, the other day, and he made a bold, I hope he's okay, I'm sharing this. He made a bold prediction. And I said, I hadn't really thought about it this extensively, but could you imagine a day that what is in essence the fitness data, the fitness record, ultimately becoming the electronic health record? In the sense that so much of today's health system is episodic and based on existing or chronic disease. And what fitness has to offer is that longitudinal view, that longitudinal opportunity to influence healthier living. You can understand the power of that from a data perspective and an influence perspective. It's a bold vision, but as I was thinking about it, you're like, you could absolutely, at a minimum, see that they converge. And could they one replace the other over time? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thought, and I've always I agree at a high level, and I believe that if there is a convergence between our industry and the health industry, which we've been talking about for so long, is that it's going to come down to digital health data in a unified language, so that we can communicate effectively what we do and the results that we get to the medical community, and then back and forth and back and forth. So, really, really good thought to leave people with. So, Bill, thank you so much. I know you got to get on to CEOing. It's always a pleasure, and yeah, really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Davis.
Eric, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and enjoy your time in Japan.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.